The rain began to fall just as the clock struck 6. Heavy drops battered the roof of the old Seattle studio with a rhythm that sounded almost intentional, like the heavens themselves were setting the tone. Inside, the air was thick, not just with the storm's humidity, but with anticipation, tension, and something deeper reverence, maybe. Every seat was filled, from the back corner where a sound tech leaned over his board, to the edge of the stage where an older woman clutched her notebook like scripture. The crowd wasn't here for a concert or a play. They were here for a conversation, one that, whether they realized it or not, would carve a mark into the fabric of modern political discourse. Under the muted glow of studio lights stood Jasmine Crockett, dressed in deep emerald green that offset the fire in her eyes. She didn't need a podium, she didn't need a teleprompter. Her voice, her posture, her presence commanded attention. But Jasmine hadn't always stood so tall. She was born in St. Louis, Missouri, raised by a single mother who worked the graveyard shift as a nurse and cleaned houses on weekends. Jasmine grew up navigating food insecurity, academic expectations, and the invisible weight that comes from being a black girl who dares to dream big in a world that often whispers she shouldn't. Her intellect had always been sharp, quick, dangerously so, but it was her defiance, her refusal to accept silence as safety, that set her apart. She went into law not for prestige, but for purpose. In courtrooms across Texas, she fought for the wrongfully accused, the forgotten, the systemically stepped on. Politics, though, was never her end goal. It found her when the silence around injustice grew louder than the injustices themselves. Now, at 43, she stood in the stormy heart of Seattle, delivering words not from a script but from her soul. And across the studio, seated with the quiet grace of someone who's fought 1,000 battles but still listens like it's her first day, was Senator Patty Murray. Patty was the quiet force behind some of the most pivotal legislation of the last 3 decades. She didn't demand spotlights, and she rarely trended online. But beneath her soft, spoken demeanor was a fire forged in grassroots grit. She began her political life pushing a stroller through the halls of power, a mom in tennis shoes who refused to be dismissed. Her strength wasn't in how loudly she spoke, but in how deeply she listened. As Jasmine's voice echoed through the studio, painting stories of incarceration, voter suppression, maternal health disparities, and generational exhaustion, the air changed. You ever been told to calm down when your people are dying? Jasmine said, her voice cracking but never breaking. You ever been asked to be patient by folks whose worst day would still be lighter than our best? I'm not angry. Don't mistake my passion for rage. I'm tired, and still I show up. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric, heavy, sacred. A young intern at the edge of the studio blinked back tears. A conservative, leaning producer, arms crossed earlier, now found his hands resting open on his knees. Patty Murray, still seated, nodded slowly, then she stood. What followed wasn't performative. There were no pre-written remarks, no talking points, just a veteran lawmaker stepping into the space created by a rising voice and saying exactly what the moment demanded. You know, Patty began softly, when I first ran for office, they told me I wasn't polished enough. Said I didn't look like a senator. I was just a mom in tennis shoes, they said. She paused. What they meant was, I didn't fit. And Jasmine, I hear you. Not just today, but from every room I've ever been in where women like us were asked to wait, to temper ourselves, to ask nicely. What you said here, it's not just powerful, It's truth, and truth deserves acknowledgement, not interruption. The room went still. Patty walked across the stage not with grandeur, but with deep respect, and extended her hand. Jasmine took it. It was the kind of moment that lives longer than any soundbite, the kind of validation that doesn't erase struggle but amplifies it with dignity. What most didn't know was that the days leading up to this studio session were fraught. Behind the scenes, Jasmine had fought with producers about whether to soften her language. Her chief of staff, Layla, a fiercely intelligent woman from Chicago who had fought for her own place in D.C. Politics, warned her, they'll try to paint you as emotional, radical, dangerous, and Jasmine had almost pulled out. At the same time, Patty had her own internal battle. Many in her party wanted her to hold the line, to not get too close to the younger, more progressive wave of Democrats. There were whispers that validating Jasmine's message might spark division, but Patty had long stopped listening to whispers that served only to maintain silence. What united both women, beyond political alignment, was something deeper, a shared understanding that change was never born from comfort. As the applause slowly rose in the studio, it wasn't raucous. It was reverent. People weren't clapping for performance. They were clapping because something true had taken place. There was a subplot, quiet but essential, that unfolded in the corner of the studio that night. Nina, a 17-year-old black high school student from Tacoma, had snuck in using a volunteer badge borrowed from her cousin. She sat on the floor, hugging her knees, eyes wide and hungry. Nina had grown up hearing that politics was a dirty game, that nobody really cared, but when Jasmine spoke, something clicked. She saw herself. And when Patty, a woman who looked nothing like her, stood and validated that fire, Nina saw what allyship could really look like. Later that night, she would go home and apply for a civic leadership scholarship. In 10 years, she'd run for office. Another subplot played out across the country, in a modest apartment in Akron, Ohio, where Calvin, a 58-year-old veteran who had grown disillusioned with both parties, watched the live stream. He'd been drawn to it out of curiosity, stayed because of Jasmine's words, and felt his defenses crumble when Patty spoke. It wasn't about agreeing with every policy. It was about trusting someone's heart again. For the first time in years, he registered to vote the next morning. The climax of the evening didn't come with fireworks or viral mic drops. It came in the form of shared silence after the applause, after the lights dimmed, as Jasmine and Patty sat backstage with paper cups of tea and no cameras in sight. "I almost didn't come," Jasmine admitted. Patty smiled. "Neither did I." They sat there, two women generations apart, from different paths but the same purpose, breathing in the aftermath of honesty. "What do we do next?" Jasmine asked. "We keep showing up," Patty said, "even when it's inconvenient, especially then." The resolution came in small ripples that grew. Clips of the exchange went viral not because of outrage, but because of grace. Thousands of women shared their own stories under the hashtag #WeShowUp. In schools, in churches, in community centers, conversations began that hadn't existed before, not because one speech changed the world, but because truth, when validated, multiplies. And the lesson was simple yet profound.